Donald Trump spent less than a day at the G7 summit in Canada. Then he left early, stating sudden escalation between Israel and Iran as the official reason. But was it really? We're going to talk about that. And I will include a little bit later in this video a fairly salacious claim about Trump at the G7. I'm Steve Sanford, you're watching Dominion Report. We all watched Mark Carney greet Trump in front of the press in Kananaskis, Alberta. I actually made a video discussing whether Carney was being tough enough on Trump. I'll put a link to that into the comments below. At that press greeting, Trump went on one of his Tradebook Rants. This one about how the G7 used to be the G8. According to Trump, Barack Obama and Justin Trudeau were the mean girls who arranged for Vladimir Putin to be kicked out of the clique. Carney neglected to point out to Trump that Russia was ousted from the G8 while Stephen Harper was still Prime Minister. Trump continued. He continued to educate Carney and the press and anybody else still paying attention that, if Russia was still in the G8, there wouldn't have been a war with Ukraine. Once again, Carney held back. He refrained from explaining that Russia was kicked out because they invaded the Crimean Peninsula, which of course is part of Ukraine. Instead of interrupting Trump, Carney actually interrupted the whole press conference, suggesting that he and Trump had many things to discuss and proceeded to shoo the reporters out of the way. That actually showed some pretty good awareness on Carney's part, and it seemed like he maybe had planned for that contingency, saw what was happening, and enacted that plan. Plus, I bet money that Trump handlers were probably grateful for Carney doing that. After less than a full day, Trump left the G7 conference early. The official reason provided was the escalating violence between Israel and Iran. Trump, we were told, had to be back in Washington to manage that situation. In the days following, we've had various reports, shall we say unconfirmed reports, plus a lot of speculation from people who weren't at the conference but are familiar with Trump's behavior. And all of this actually contradicts the official communications from the Trump team. I'll stress that the following are based on these reports. People have said they have people inside or people who know or familiar with the situation, and of course the speculations of people familiar with Trump's behavior. All of these do fit patterns of known and oft reported Trump-type behavior. Trump was apparently angry that French President Emmanuel Macron had visited Greenland immediately prior to coming to Canada for the G7. Macron's visit was a show of solidarity and force, and that was with Greenland and Denmark both. Plus, while there, Macron at a press conference made comments about Putin and Russia, suggesting that Putin would not be an appropriate mediator between Israel and Iran, which of course directly contradicted Trump's earlier public suggestion. And I mean, let's be clear, who could possibly want the guy who started a war with Ukraine, counter to his own country's signed agreements with Ukraine, as well as disrespecting the UN Charter, to broker a peace deal between two other countries, one of which his country is strategically aligned with? Now, that's a rhetorical question, but as I speak it out loud, I guess I probably just answered my own question, because the answer, of course, is Trump. Trump would want that, I guess, because America first or something. Then there were reports that most of the leaders at the G7 in Canada ignored Trump. I mean, of course they did. He's that weird playground kid who is a rude bully that nobody wants to interact with. Plus, I would imagine nobody wants to be seen interacting with him either. And here's a good one. Volodymyr Zalinski, president of Ukraine, was scheduled to arrive the next day. This is the very same Zalinski who Trump ambushed at the White House with an abhorrent display of foreign policy bullying. Trump, of course, did that while surrounded by his VP, his Secretary of State, and an entire team of sycophants. At the G7, Trump would be facing Zalinski surrounded by supporters of Ukraine. So he chickened out on that social situation. He probably went to eat a taco or something. And now, we've come to the salacious tidbit that I did promise you. Before we go to that, I'm just going to ask you to subscribe. If you like this content and you want to see more, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. I really appreciate it. Okay, here it is. One report coming from the G7 is that Trump really stinks. Apparently, insiders claimed he had a significantly bad odor. Obviously, we can't confirm this is true. I didn't smell him myself, but this is not the first time that this has been reported about Trump. Now, with regard to Iran, Trump's negotiating team had been attempting to work a deal with them regarding their nuclear weapons program. And then Netanyahu pulled the rug out from under that by attacking Iran without reportedly letting their American counterparts know ahead of time. And the timing with which Netanyahu did that, especially with regard to Trump's attendance at the G7, is also, shall we say, interesting. I'm not actually sure how much Trump is aware how weak he looks on the international stage. I'll add one more thing with regard to Iran's nuclear weapon development. If only there had already been a deal in place to limit Iran's nuclear capability, then maybe this whole situation could have been avoided. And of course, if there had been, nobody surely would be stupid enough to unilaterally tear it up for no valid reason. Am I right? But I digress. It was so important for Trump to return early from the G7 to spend hours and hours in the following days with his foreign affairs team and his military advisors that just 2 days later, he revealed 2 gigantic phallic symbols at the White House. Pardon me, flagpoles. 2 gigantic flagpoles at the White House. Maybe it's just me, but I don't see how flagpoles at the White House will stop Iran from building nuclear weapons. Just saying. And of course, Trump has since proven how easily he can be manipulated. Netanyahu had asked every single president since H.W. Bush to bomb Iran. He finally succeeded with Trump, getting him to drop American-sized bombs that were bigger than any that Israel has. And to do that for strategic purposes that benefit only Israel. Again, with the America First anti-war president. No wonder he had to leave the G7 in Canada early.